Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I wanted to share a few tools with you and some stories. So, first, I want to tell you about the formula for change. One of the things that I love working with people on is that next step, that transformation in their life. And there's been a lot of scientific research about this. And one of the things that came out of that was something called the formula for change. And it's pretty simple. There's three ingredients. In order to create change or to take the next step in your life or to create your next business or to create your next project or product, three things need to be present. First is discomfort, some level of dissatisfaction with however things are. The second is a vision. That's what we're going to work on today. The third thing that you need is an idea of a next small first step. So if you don't have all three of these things, you can see how you might not be motivated or energized to create change in your life. But if you're not uncomfortable, if your life is good, that can really get in the way of you actually making change because you don't want to knock down everything you've created. If you don't have an idea of what to do next, you might have a great vision, but have no idea how to get there. The vision part is what we're going to talk about today. And I had a really great session with a new client yesterday. This is someone who's got a very high level in the branding world. And he shared a story with me that I want to share with you today. And it illustrates how we think about and how we use vision to create those first steps. So he told me the story of King Arthur meeting Merlin. And I'm paraphrasing his paraphrase. So Arthur, I don't know if he's even king at this point, but he's wandering through the woods. He's wandering through his lands and he runs into this guy and he introduces himself. And the guy says, "My name is Merlin." And he invites him in for dinner. And Arthur goes into Merlin's house, Merlin, the great wizard. And Arthur notices that on the table, there's two place settings. And he's sort of surprised. And he says, "Wait a minute. How did you notice that two places? Were you expecting me?" And Merlin explained, "Well, I actually live in the future. And so I'm just experiencing life back from the future." So the point of the story is that this is kind of how visioning works. What we're doing when we do visioning work for ourselves and our lives is we paint a picture of what our future is like. It is a fiction, and you should use your imagination and not let that inner critic and those voices asking you, "Well, how are you going to do that?" What we're going to do today is we're going to do a brief visioning exercise. I like these exercises on this podcast to be brief so that you can do them at home, maybe even do them while you're listening to the podcast. So if you're a regular listener, you probably have a journal. If you're new to the podcast, grab a piece of paper and go buy a journal for next time. So what you're going to do is you're going to write a description of what that future might look like. And there's a couple of ways to think about it. One is a little bit easier for some people to imagine, and one is a little bit easier for the others. So you could imagine a future, and I would pick something, say 3 years out. 3 years is a good amount of time because it's hard to really know exactly how the next 3 years are going to go, but it's not so far off that it's hard to imagine. It's going to be the vision you're going to create is about a next phase or a next chapter. So imagine that we got in a time machine and we went about 3 years out and we met you. If you were to paint a picture or write down on a journal page, what would that world look like for that person? What are they like? What are the qualities that they have? How do they seem to you? How do they feel? How do they tell you that they feel? Do they have a different haircut? Do they live in a different house? Are they doing a different job? Do they have more or less of certain kinds of things in their lives? You can describe this however you want. And I would just encourage you to keep the pencil or the pen flowing. Don't pause, don't think, because when you start to pause and think, you start to judge. That inner critic starts to come in and saying, this is too weird. People will laugh at you, any of those things. Just write a page or 2 pages, whatever works for you, about what that world looks like for that person. The key to this exercise is that we're traveling in this time machine and we're meeting this other version of ourselves. So we almost imagine it like it's somebody else, which makes it a little bit easier for us because we don't have to know how they got there. We're just describing the life that would feel more fulfilling and more aligned with our purpose. So in a future podcast, we can talk about how to create first steps in there, but you might start to figure it out as you write. So now that you've got a vision, let's just remember the formula for change is discomfort, vision, and first steps. Maybe you've got those already. So that's where I want to leave things today. And I also want to remind you that these exercises are great. I use them all the time with myself, with my clients, and they do work better if you have the support of a coach. So if you're interested in figuring out what exactly that extra support looks like, you can go to my website and book a discovery call with me, and you can see what shows up and what value you get. I was actually really, really amazed at the conversations that I've had recently with people like my client yesterday, who on paper, I would say that they don't need a coach. They're doing all these great things in their lives. They're at the top of their game. They even have a plan for the future. But I'm always surprised when we do this work, and this exercise is part of the work that we do. At the end of these sessions, they almost always, actually, maybe always, at the end of these sessions, they always say something like, huh, I just realized something. I know what I have to do. And that for me is gold. I love that result for my clients. So if you're interested, again, you can find my information on the website and book a free discovery call. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, as always, please like, rate, share, tell your friends about it. If you found it valuable, I would love for you to support the podcast in that way. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.